I'm Ryan with Inglewood Instruments. Today I am at 4115 over here in Inglewood, actually still in East Nashville. I'm with Dewey Boyd, who is one of the owner of
the owner of 4115.
the singular owner of 4115. And Dewey and I have known each other for a long time. He has been gracious enough to have me in using the studio at different times for different projects, not just Inglewood. I'll let him answer a lot of different questions we got today. I know this is a bit different than some of the other interviews we've done where we were talking with musicians and artists, but Dewey comes at things from the engineering and production kind of side of things. So Dewey, welcome to whatever this is.
Yeah.
And I like to start of like, how do you remember we met? Because I have interesting memories.
Oh man, I literally just remembered the first memory I have, and I hadn't thought of this before. I had just stepped in doing sound at City Church, City Church of East Nashville, and it was the first time I had done it in that building behind Rose Pepper. And
way back then,
wow. Something like circa 2009.
Yeah.
And I think you got there a little late, and so I had done sound check and everything, and I'd assumed incorrectly in that room that it would get a little bit quieter when the room filled up with people, and so it was a smidge on the loud side, and you came in and immediately confronted me about it. And I was like, well, the monitors are at this level and I can't change that. And I have to be this loud to be louder than the monitors for it to sound any good out here. So it just is what it is. It's going to be fine. And you grilled me with 2 or 3 questions. And then you were like, well, you answered all these questions correctly. I'm satisfied. And then you walked away.
Did I just leave you to run the sound?
You totally did. You left me alone because I was like, I checked all the boxes. Like, oh, this guy probably does actually know what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, that all checks out. Okay, fair.
Most likely knows more than I do.
It's going to be a little bit loud today.
Yeah. For those who don't know, live sound is a completely different animal than studio sound. I studied studio. My only live sound experience is having been at what we would call a very set up and tear down grassroots situation for the church we have met at and attend, and Dewey very quickly became the one who was authoritative enough to give more better opinion on live sound than I ever was. So now, speaking about live sound for just a second, you currently do a couple things for income, and one of them has become live sound. I don't think at the time you were doing any live sound. Right?
No, yeah, I wasn't. So, I started a recording studio here back in 2012.
This one,
and as probably any recording studio owner would tell you, it's tough going.
Yeah.
And I realized that, I'd done live sound since I was a kid, and that was a great side hustle. And so I started doing live sound for a wedding band for 2 or 3 years, and honestly kind of fell backwards in the touring gig that I have now. So now I'm the touring front of house engineer for Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder.
Yep.
And then I, just through filling in with some other people, I occasionally go out with Dan Tominski, the Dan Tominski band, and I'm also his tour manager as well.
Is he bluegrass as well?
He's bluegrass.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Though he has known internationally for his EDM hit.
Whoa.
Well, not really his EDM hit. It was Avicii's EDM hit. Hey Brother.
Okay.
And he is the voice of Hey Brother by Avicii.
Whoa.
Just like he is the voice of Man of Constant Sorrow in the face of George Clooney and the voice of Dan Tominski.
Yes. I do remember looking at that.
Where art thou?
And so for people who are not familiar with some of these different genres now, I think of Ricky Skaggs. He's bluegrass, straight up and down. Mm-hmm. I think of him, I think I would describe him recently to someone as like the grandson of bluegrass almost, because he's been around long enough that he was in the cloud of people we might call the forefathers of it. Yeah. Am I right? Wrong?
No, you're totally right. Yeah. He, Bill Monroe started bluegrass in 1946. And, Ricky, when he was a child, saw him play when he was like 6 years old in the 60s, early 60s. And then sort of the first generation of people who are doing that style of music would be like Ralph Stanley and Flat and Scruggs, that crew. And Ricky, when he was a teenager, started touring as a member of the Clinch Mountain Boys, which is Ralph Stanley's band. And so he was kind of in the first generation of bluegrassers, as like he and Keith Whitley were actually in that band as like 15-year-old guys.
Whoa.
So I mean, he might be more like a son,
Okay,
rather than grandson. Yeah.
Here's what I don't know, right?
No, well, yeah. I mean, he's been touring since. I mean, gosh. He's been touring. He's 70 now. I mean, that's
60 years.
I mean, at least 55. Yeah, he's been touring consistently for about 55 years.
That's nuts.
Which is completely nuts.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the live sound side of things, but we're in a recording studio today. For those who didn't know, a lot of the demo videos we've done for the Cumberlands have been shot here. And then my buddy Dave out of Florida and I have actually recorded here. You weren't in town.
That's right.
Yeah, we did a fun cover of Here Comes the Sun, which I will never release to anyone. So you could even say, I don't know. So anyway, give us a sense of where you are in the landscape music things now. Obviously, you're running front of house and you've got the studio here.
Yeah.
When you're not out on the road, or when you are, like, where are you with things?
Yeah. So what I realized in my time as an intern and an assistant before I had my own recording studio was that even like if you're doing the recording studio thing or being an engineer or a producer, even if you're kind of booked wall to wall with projects, you are still probably not actually doing one of those projects every day, or you're not using most of your equipment every day. And so I wanted to make a space where other people could be creative as well and use my toys when I wasn't using them. And so that was kind of the thought behind putting this place together. Mm-hmm. Now that I'm touring and doing these other things as well, that vision is just kind of extrapolated. You know, I'm doing a smattering of producing and engineering for other people, and also do like studio mixing for other people. Mm-hmm. And then, but in all the time that I'm not actively recording in here, our aim is to have other people in here using the space.
Yeah.
So we rent it out like commercially as a recording studio to other engineers and producers, or for video shoots, things like that.
So that's a bit of how you got where you are. Any particular plans on where you're headed next? Is it sort of like, and also where are you with, do you have a preferred type of project to do when you're working out here? Is there like a genre or a method of recording or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of why I have this space that I do is because there's so many different ways to record music.
Yeah.
And what I really like to do is to record a group of people. You could say it's like ensemble recording or a whole band recording, like full band tracking. And I personally, like from a personality standpoint and musically, kind of thrive on the interaction between different musicians playing together. Other people are really well suited to do one thing at a time. Or like, maybe some producers are like mastermind track builders and they can take someone's idea and like build it one piece at a time. But like for me, I want and really need to get a group of people together to take the seed of the idea, take the spark and like ignite it. But unfortunately, like that takes a lot of space. Which and it's also expensive because you have to hire multiple people to do this. And that's why I have this space that I do that can accommodate that. So as far as like where I'm going, or what the kind of projects I like to do. The kind of projects that I find myself in, and largely because of my live sound work, it's been mostly in the bluegrass world. And so I've become known and I have a whole lot of practice at doing bluegrass or doing things that are acoustic based or folk or Americana. I really love that style of music. A lot of my like musical background is more in sort of like 70s pop.
Interesting.
Like singer-songwriter, like kind of James Taylor, Carole King, like that kind of world. Like, okay. I love recording drums. I love recording like really interesting chord progressions. And I did recently realize, and this is embarrassing, but it's for the people, that that a lot of the music that I like could it's like the cooler end of yacht rock.
Yeah.
Like if I put on a yacht rock playlist, I'm like pretty into it for a while.
Whoa.
Now there's a lot of it I'm like, oh no, this is cheesy. I'm not into that. But like the Dewey Brothers or can't think what else.
Toto.
Toto's kind of on the line. Toto's on the line for me.
Okay.
But yeah, like the Dewey Brothers, some of the more popular songs by America or
Oh yeah.
Hall & Oates.
Yeah.
Dude, I got a soft spot for Hall & Oates.
Okay.
I mean,
See, I didn't know this.
yeah, I mean, like stacked vocal harmonies, like
Okay.
the cool 70s thunky drums, and like the bass lines are incredible. Like they're just really, really, a lot of them are really, really well written songs with really interesting harmonic things going on that I don't always have that itch scratched in like folk music.
Mhm.
Usually the chord progressions are a bit simpler.
Yeah.
And in bluegrass, I don't get the itch scratch with, from a percussion or like that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's funny though, like progressive bluegrass kind of heads in that direction a little bit, which is fun. So anyway, that's the kind of music that I'm into and that I end up working on, things that need to be recorded with like an ensemble, like bluegrass does. And so as far as like where I'm going, I'm excited to keep doing a lot of the things that I'm doing. I think there's room to grow and do even more recording here, and to take on more projects. So I'm excited to see the calendar fill up with the kind of music that I want to work on.
Yeah. So we'll take a brief tour a little bit later on. You've got 4 main isolation rooms, kind of spaces in the area. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah. I don't think of them as terrible. One of them is pretty isolated.
Yeah. Which is one of my favorite rooms.
It's a great room. And then in the front, there are 3 rooms that are connected. Yeah. Across the front, there's a room where the drum kit usually is, and then there's the 2 other rooms.
Yeah.
So
cool. While I'm thinking about it, while we're on the topic, are there a couple of projects, either past or kind of future, like by the time we're in late 2024, so people might be seeing this in early 2025. Is there anything that is sparking your current creativity list, or something that you think is a great example of work you've done in the past that would be good for people to check out?
Yeah. Well, here's 2 projects. There's one by an artist named Zeb Snyder.
Okay.
And he's in the bluegrass world. He's putting out more of a like blues oriented acoustic project, sort of blues / bluegrass acoustic project. And he had himself and a large part of the band from Tony Rice's Manzanita album.
Okay.
So, which is, if you're in the bluegrass world, is like a really big album. And so it's Sam Bush on mandolin and Todd Phillips on bass. They both played on that album.
Okay.
And then he had Jason Carter play fiddle, and he's Del McCurry's fiddle player. So
big number of names there. Yeah.
Incredible band, incredible songs. Zeb did such a great job performing. So it's mixed now. It's going to be mastered at some point and released at some point.
Maybe in 2025.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like a really urgent push to get it going, because Zeb is playing like on the road in this band called Appalachian Roadshow.
Okay.
And so this is sort of a fun project for him, but it's really, really good. I'm excited for everybody to hear it. On a very, very different end of the spectrum, there's this project that I do a lot of work with. This group called Solos.
Oh, okay.
Which is like starts with a P. So it's like the Psalms, PSALLOS. And they just released a 2 EP project for the Christmas season this year.
Okay, yeah.
So there's an Advent EP and a Christmas EP. And it's this composer named Cody Curtis, and he's done several albums that I've mixed all of them. And I've done some degree of recording on all of them. This most recent one, I did a lot of the recording with it, except for the vocals and the woodwinds.
Wow, we had woodwinds.
There were woodwinds. Oh man,
Jeez.
Yeah. If you listen to any of these projects, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course, the woodwinds.
Yeah.
And so there's a version of O Come, O Come, Emmanuel that sounds like what if Radiohead did O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. Yeah, it's fantastic. So, and that's out now. You should definitely check that out.
All right. We'll link to that here in the description or on the page, depending on where you're watching things. Cool. We're going to take a tour, glue a couple of these ideas together, come back, finish up. Okay, Dewey, now, one of the things that I find particularly fun about recording is just the process of getting going. Like, how am I going to approach this? Now, granted, most of the time I'm recording, I'm at my house by myself.
Right.
So there's not a whole lot there, but you've got a larger format space.
Yeah.
You've got different artists that you're coming in with that you're not necessarily working with all the time. I understand this question is a very large potential topic of books, but like,
Sure.
what would be some of the first considerations you'd have when beginning a project with an artist and thinking about the space you have and
Right.
recording and stuff?
Yeah. So I think the place where I start, I mean, it's listening. It's just listening. That's literally what I'm being hired to do, is to listen. And so step one is to listen to the artist and like their music and what their constraints are. And in doing that, that kind of opens up a lot of clarity about what it is we're actually doing. You know, what's the instrumentation going to be? What are the budgetary constraints? Do they want to, what kind of experience do they want to have while they're recording? If I listen to their songs or their work tapes, like, what limitations are there in their performance that I might need to account for in recording, so that I can either give them more chances to get it right or give myself some digital leeway to do some surgery on the back end. And kind of putting all of those things together to make some sort of plan that would actually play out and successfully recording the music the way that they want to record it. And I would argue that with that means I want to consider for myself, and I want everyone to consider, especially in a town like Nashville, what is the right space to record in, because it might not be here, and that's totally okay. Like, I want to have the freedom as an engineer, and I want other engineers to have the freedom to listen to the project and say, like what paint do I want to squeeze in my palette for this project? And a huge consideration in that is like, well, which studio are we going to go to? Which may dictate budget. It dictates like what instruments are available and what gear is available.
Yeah.
And there's just so many different ways to record. And so I think it's kind of a disservice to an artist to assume one of those pieces out of the gate and then try to force the project through all those little holes. So yeah, the first step is just to listen. And then for me, there's a good bit of like iterative process of going back and forth. And, a lot of times I'll ask for some references of like what, like, musical adjectives are hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say. I want this to sound blank.
Yeah.
Purple. Yeah, exactly. And so I like to, collect some references, not to be overly referential, but to have a sense of like what's going to be sonically permissible. Or maybe there's some commonality across these things that might give me some clues for what they're looking for, especially if I'm in the producer, wearing the producer hat on the project. Then that gives me either some homework to do, to listen to try to have some sonic empathy about like, what in the world does this person actually want? How can I help them achieve their vision rather than just imposing like my own preferences, my own taste? I have to kind of get inside what it is that they're doing. And then but part of figuring that out is this like vulnerable exchange of going back and forth, like, oh, what about this? And then they either like, well, I really hate that, bat it down, or they're like, yes, that's exactly it, more. And that's when you're heading in the right direction, is when like your instincts start to align with what it is they actually want, and you're able to like articulate, define things that they weren't able to yet. And so then you know, like, oh, okay, well, gosh, now I know like which drummer to call, or now I know like where we ought to be or what instruments we need to do. And once you start coalescing that information into a plan, then you can start doing the more boring part of like, okay, well, we're going to need this amount of time. Probably you can start building on a budget. Like, we're going to need these people. We're going to need this place. We're going to need this much time.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it's going to take. And really from there, you just start setting in motion, kicking around like the work tapes of the songs and working on the songs themselves, writing out charts, figuring out like what state the arrangements are in. Is there anything that we'd want to look at changing, and like teeing all that up as best we can before we invite the other players into the room, and making sure like we're unified on like what what the vision is. And that way, when the players bring their own ideas to the table, we kind of both have a sense of like, oh, wow, yeah, that's great. I never thought of that. Or like, that's not really the vibe.
Yeah.
So that way you don't like burn too much studio time trying to figure out what you really want. But if you have a vision and you know kind of where you're going, if somebody comes up with a better idea, you know, and you can accept it and move on.
Yeah. There you go. There is a project you were mentioning that's kind of off the beaten path that you might be getting into. Just curious what that's going to be about.
Are you talking about the podcast?
I was kind of referring to the podcast.
Let's think of the podcast.
I came in today and I did not know there was going to be a podcast starting up. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, there's a tentative podcast right now that my interns are initiating, and the working title is, at least that's what I think.
Which I think is funny because I've heard you say that multiple times over the years when it's like, gear question. Oh, what we're going to do about this live sound. Well, at least that's what I think. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much subjectivity in process and, you know, what like, I think a lot of young engineers and I was, and maybe am still included in that, are looking for like, what is the path? What is the path to do this thing well? What is the path to turn this into a business? What is the path to like make good recordings that I'm proud of? And the more people that I've talked to, the more that I've seen that nobody's path has been quite the same. And so it's very, very difficult and maybe even dangerous to be prescriptive about that. But I think that there are a whole lot of things that are pitfalls that can be dodged if you're listening, if you're paying attention and taking good advice from people who've walked a path before. So my interns can get me on soapbox speeches about different things that I've learned from failures of my own making. And they were like, gosh, I wish this were a podcast. I was like, that's not a bad idea. Let's do that. So it's not so much like a how-to podcast. It's broader in a way, like about like, this is how I think about, you know, how to choose which microphone, and or like, you know, this is how I think about like, what's the minimum, like what's the gear that I ought to buy, or just solving different puzzles of like quandaries that young engineers or even established engineers run across that are a little bit more involved in like, how do I make my snare drum sound good? I mean, that's a subject of another podcast, but not my podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the question I've been wanting to ask lots of people, my final question.
Oh yeah, of course.
Is if you could record or live mix any artist, alive or dead.
Oh man,
give us, you know,
an answer.
Yeah, an answer.
I know I can't possibly make a final answer.
No.
Well, I alluded to them earlier.
Today's answer.
Today's answer. The Dewey brothers are on my mind.
Oh.
Yeah, with Michael McDonald. Like, what a fool believes. I mean, like, come on, you gotta have it. I love so much about that recording that I think it'd be super fun to see that pulled off live.
That is totally not the answer I was expecting.
I'm so curious what the answer you were expecting would be.
I don't have one other than like, as of today, I'm learning there's a lot more acoustic stuff going on for you than like sure. I've known of because of what you've been doing for your day gigs and like going on the road. And I knew tangentially from like Instagram, you guys had these artists in there, but you're never really sure when you see an artist here, it's one you've been working with. So it's like, you know, I was beginning to believe it wasn't an indie rock band kind of a thing, but you could have said the Beatles and I would have been like, oh yeah, you know. And so,
well, the Beatles is the obvious answer. I don't know that my brain really works the way to like to do the kind of things that they did. You know, like that was a big stretch. But honestly, like I think a lot of those choices were their own. You know, they kind of pushed their engineer to make choices.
Oh yeah, that
were questionable and that turned out to be amazing. So, which I guess I am open to that. I'm not scared, but that I guess that's not my default. Like as an engineer, like me getting to bring something to the table, it doesn't feel quite as like harmonious as, you know, something like the Dewey brothers. It's like, y'all play, you do your thing, I'm gonna do my thing. It's gonna be great. But
yeah, there you go. Well, thanks for joining us and having a chat.
Yeah.